Welcome to Back on the Stack, a cEDH channel. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe to show your support. Another way to support us is to check out our Bonfire site, where we have a great selection of wearables with our rad logo. Now, let's get right into it and see what decks are being piloted tonight.
Hey everybody, it's Eli, and tonight I'm piloting Thrasios and Tevesh. This is a fun Sultai pile that utilizes Doomsday and Tevesh's ability to crack the pile. I had to mold down to 5 here, but I'm in first seat, and this is a turn 1 Thrasios, turn 2 Ristic. Couldn't really pass this up.
How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. I run the YouTube channel Lemora's Cards, do the Learning cEDH podcast, top 16 breakdowns, all that. You can find me at Lemora's Cards, most places on the internet. And today I'm playing my auto-focus build of Thras. I kept a kind of greedy opening hand, having access to my Cradle, as well as turn 1 Roger and Thrasios, untapping with at least 3 mana. With Trophy Mage, which is one of the most flexible tutors in the deck. I can use it to go get more mana with Relic of Legends or get a win condition like Cloudstone Cure of Assault Monolith. And I have a Sowing Mica Spawn, which can help set me up. The Dowerport Mage in my hand is kind of dead, and the Psych Rift is just easy pitch fodder to Chrome Mox this early in the game. But we have lots of different options, lots of flexibility, and we have a plan to get to big mana, which is really a lot of what this deck is trying to do.
Hey guys, it's your boy Corbin, and this week I'm playing Esika again. This deck looks to get out an early game advantage engine such as Smothering Tithe, Ristic Study, or Necropotence, then end the game out with an Underworld Breach line or a Thras' Oracle combo. The hand that I kept has a Vampiric tutor, which is going to allow me to go get my Ristic Study or my Smothering Tithe depending on what my opponents play. I also have a Mox Diamond and multiple lands to pitch to it, as well as a City of Traders. If I top deck well, I can play the Smothering Tithe on turn 2 if I want to go get it, or have access to Ristic Study immediately.
Tonight I'm playing my Talion list. Since the bans, I've tweaked the list a bit to lean very hard into self-mill and reanimation. The main goal of this deck is to assemble a Thras' Oracle combo. I kept this hand because I was already mulling down to 5 and I didn't want to go any lower, especially being disadvantaged in 4th seed already. Plus, I had half a win con, lands, and some artifact ramp with 1 piece of counter magic, so I decided to stick with it. With introductions out of the way, Eli will start us off. He draws and plays Command Tower for turn. He casts Mox Diamond. It ETBs and he discards Marsh Flats. He casts his commander, Thrasios. He passes. Matthew draws and casts his commander, Rograk, son of Roha. He casts Chrome Mox. It ETBs and he imprints Cyclonic Rift. He plays Gaia's Cradle for land. He casts his other commander, Thrasios. He passes. Corbin draws and casts Mox Diamond. It ETBs and he discards Flooded Strands. He plays Mana Confluence for turn. He passes. J-Rock draws and plays Underground Sea for turn. He simply passes. Eli draws and plays Boseiju Who Endures as land for turn. He casts Ristic Study. In response, J-Rock casts Swan Song. In response, Eli pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep. Misstep counters Swan Song and Ristic resolves. Then Eli casts the last card in his hand, Lion's Eye Diamond. He passes. Matthew draws and casts Trophy Mage. Ristic triggers and Eli draws. Trophy Mage then ETBs and Matthew tutors Relic of Legends to hand. He moves through phases, but in his end step, Corbin casts Vampiric Tutor. Ristic triggers and he pays. It resolves, he tutors a card to the top of his library, loses 2 life, and the turn moves to Corbin. Corbin draws and plays City of Traders for turn. He casts his own Ristic Study. Eli's Ristic triggers and he pays. He then passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays Underground River for turn. He casts Dark Ritual. Both Ristics trigger and both Corbin and Eli draw. It resolves and he adds 3 black to his pool. He uses it all to help cast his commander, Talion, the Kindly Lord. Both Ristics trigger and both Corbin and Eli draw. As Talion ETBs, he chooses the number 2. He passes. Eli draws and plays Manamo, School at Water's Edge for turn. He simply passes. Matthew draws and casts Candelabra of Tawnos. Both Ristics trigger, he pays for Corbin's and Eli draws. He uses his floating green to activate Candelabra, untapping Gaia's Cradle. He casts Relic of Legends. Both Ristics trigger and both Corbin and Eli draw. He casts Steel Enchantment, targeting Eli's Ristic. Both Ristics and Talion trigger and all opponents draw. In response, Eli activates Thrasios, revealing and drawing Thras' Oracle. Then, Steel Enchantment resolves and Matthew gains control of Eli's Ristic. Matthew then casts Dramatic Reversal. Ristic and Talion both trigger and both J-Rock and Corbin draw. Then, Matthew untaps all of his non-land permanents. He activates Candelabra again, untapping Gaia's Cradle. He casts Sowing Mica Spawn. Ristic triggers and he pays. It ETBs and he tutors Manamo, School at Water's Edge to the battlefield. He passes. Corbin draws and casts his commander, Esika, God of the Tree. Ristic triggers and he pays. Corbin moves through phases and passes. J-Rock draws and plays Flooded Strand for turn. He casts Arcane Signet. Both Rystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. J-Rock pays a life, sacks Flooded Strand, and fetches a basic swamp to the battlefield. He casts Talisman of Dominance. Both Rystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. J-Rock moves through phases and passes. Eli draws and plays Bayou for turn. He moves through phases, but in his end step, Matthew untaps Gaia's Cradle through Manamo and then activates Thrasios. He puts Hedge Mage into play tapped. It ETBs and he surveils 1, leaving it on top. The turn then moves to Matthew. Matthew draws and casts Mana Vault. Rhystic triggers and he pays. He untaps Gaia's Cradle through Manamo. He casts Finale of Devastation where X equals 5. Rhystic triggers and he pays. In response, Corbin casts Force of Will for its alternative casting cost, exiling Pact of Negation. Rhystic triggers and Matthew draws. In response, Matthew activates Candelabra and untaps both Gaia's Cradle and Manamo. He hard casts Mindbreak Trap. Rhystic triggers and he pays. In response, Corbin casts Deflecting Swat, targeting Mindbreak. It resolves, changing the target of Mindbreak Trap to Mindbreak Trap. Force of Will counters Finale, and Matthew passes the turn. Corbin draws and immediately casts Culling Ritual. Rhystic triggers and Matthew draws. In response, J-Rock taps his Talisman to float a black. Eli also taps his Mox Diamond to float a black. Matthew then activates Thrasios, showing and drawing Pact of Negation to hand. He casts Pact, targeting Culling Ritual. Rhystic triggers and Corbin draws. Then Pact counters Culling Ritual. Corbin attempts to move through phases, but in response, Eli uses his floating black to cast Dark Ritual. Both Rhystic's trigger and both Matthew and Corbin draw. Eli casts Valley Floodcaller. Both Rhystic's trigger, Eli pays for Corbin's, and Matthew draws. It resolves, and with priority back to Corbin, he plays Emergent Zone as land for turn. City of Traitors triggers, and he sacrifices it. The turn that moves to J-Rock. J-Rock draws and casts Felwar Stone. Both Rhystic's trigger, and he pays for both. He moves through phases and attempts to pass, but in response, Eli casts Chord of Calling, where X equals 2. Both Rhystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. Then Eli tutors Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, to the battlefield. The turn then moves to Eli. Eli draws and plays Scalding Tarn for turn. He casts Basalt Monolith. Rhystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. In response, Corbin casts Cabal Ritual with Threshold. Rhystic and Talion both trigger and both Matthew and J-Rock draw. It resolves and he adds 5 black to his mana pool. Corbin casts Tainted Pact. Rhystic and Talion both trigger and both Matthew and J-Rock draw. It resolves and Corbin exiles cards from the top of his library until he reveals and puts to hand Force of Negation. He casts the Force of Negation, exiling Mental Misstep. Rhystic triggers and he pays. Then Force counters and exiles Basalt. Eli then pays a life, sacks his Scalding Tarn, and fetches Underground Sea to the battlefield. He casts Talion. Both Rhystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. Then Talion resolves, and as it ETBs, Eli also chooses the number 2. He moves through phases and passes. In his upkeep, Matthew pays for his Pact trigger. He draws and plays Talon Gates of Madara for turn. It ETBs and he phases out J-Rock's Talion. He activates Manamo and untaps Gaia's Cradle. Matthew casts Retraction Helix, targeting Microspawn. Rhystic triggers and he pays. He then taps Microspawn, bouncing Eli's Talion back to hand. Matthew activates Candelabra and untaps Manamo and Gaia's Cradle. He casts Cloudstone Curio. Rhystic triggers and he pays. In response, J-Rock casts Force of Negation, exiling Glimpse the Unthinkable. Both Rhystic's trigger, he pays for Matthew's, and Corbin draws. Then Force counters and exiles Cloudstone. Matthew casts Cloud of Fairies. Rhystic triggers and he pays. It ETBs and he untaps Manamo and Gaia's Cradle. Matthew casts Spellseeker. Rhystic triggers and he pays. In response, J-Rock casts Strix Serenade. Both Rhystic's trigger and both Corbin and Matthew draw. Strix then counters Spellseeker and Matthew creates a 2/2 bird token. Matthew casts Arcane Signet. Rhystic triggers and Corbin draws. Matthew casts Transmute Artifact. Rhystic triggers and Corbin draws. It resolves and he sacrifices Relic of Legends. He then tutors Mox Opal to the battlefield. He moves through phases and passes. Corbin draws and plays Command Tower for turn. He casts Thassa's Oracle. Rhystic triggers and he pays. With the ETB trigger on the stack, he casts Demonic Consultation, naming Squirrel Dealer. He exiles his entire library and Thassa ETBs. With his devotion to blue greater than the cards remaining in his library, Corbin wins the game. Matthew was definitely a major threat the entire game. However, Corbin was able to sit back and draw his win con through Rhystic the entire time. A huge shout out and thanks to Matthew from Lemora's Cards for jamming some games with us. Feel free to check out the deck links listed below, and we will see you back on the stack.
I cast a Steel Enchantment.
Hey.
What's the target? You have a higher chance of yours resolving targeting Corbin.
What do you think, J-Rock?
Eli's got an advantage over Corbin at the moment.
Thank you for being a reasonable man, J-Rock.
You're targeting
I'm not
mine?
getting anybody's, yeah.
You're good to have my heuristic.
Oh,
I thought